Composition, simply put, is the arrangement of elements in your frame. But how do you arrange them in a way that's pleasing and one that's relevant to your story? Hey, I'm Verena from You Storytelling, and if you haven't heard, we're a little obsessed with story, and we believe that every decision that you make in your film should reflect and support your story. Now, when it comes to composing a shot, we always go back to Hitchcock's rule that the size of anything in your frame should be related to the importance of the subject in your story at that moment. For example, in a story we just filmed at Prairie Shoe Factory, the main character Bill creates custom handmade shoes. The product of his handiwork, the boots and other shoes, are a large part of the outcome of the story, and it's appropriate to make them large in the frame. So today we're going to look at a few tips that will help you in composing your shots and keep it relevant to your story. But before we go into our tips, let's discuss the biggest mistake people make when starting out. Here it is: centering the subject of your image. I don't know what it is, but it seems like we all have a natural human desire to center things. But the easiest place to start when learning composition is with something I'm sure you've heard of, the rule of thirds. This theory or rule defines what is a pleasing composition within a frame to a human eye. With the rule of thirds, imagine there are a set of lines that divide the frame in equal thirds, both horizontally and vertically. The human eye naturally gravitates to the 4 intersecting points of these lines, and the rule says that these points are the ideal spot to place objects in your composition. Okay, now let's dive into the 4 ways you can better your composition. The first tip is one that graphic designers use all the time, and it's called the squint. Look at your image, then squint. When you're slightly out of focus, what you're paying attention to is where your eye is drawn. You want to think about if your eye is going where you want your audience's eyes to go. For example, if we're filming at an interview and there's a window or a bright light right behind the subject, when I squint, my eye is drawn to that light, but in most cases we don't want the audience to pay attention to that light. We want them to focus on the character's face or his hands or what he's actually saying. So we need to switch our lighting or reframe the composition so that we can get that result. The point is that you need to be constantly evaluating where your viewer is looking versus where you want them to look. That's a critical point because you can miss the story if your composition directs the attention to the wrong subject. The second tip is to scan the edges of your frame. So before you hit record, stop, look at your screen and glance at each edge of your frame, because this is often where you can make minor improvements that make a big difference in the composition. There might be a pole that's just barely in the side of the frame, or you have half of the window framed in the shot, but not the whole thing. You can clean up your shot by fully removing or adding in these elements. So take a short moment and before you hit record, look at all 4 edges. The third point, look at the intersections of your layers in your shot. This is important, especially as it relates to any people in your frame. You want to avoid any layers that behead or dissect or interfere with your talent, as it's very distracting. It's easy to hit record and we don't notice that a pole or a railing looks like it's cutting off the talent's head. Pay attention to your character and how they are balanced with the background. The layers in your frame should complement the character. They should fit and live in the background and not frame a person in a way that's funny or silly or looks unrelated to the story. And tip number 4, seek symmetry. Symmetry is a powerful tool for composition. Often when we are shooting scenes, instead of using symmetry and having really clean lines, we tend to be 10 to 15 degrees off. So take a moment, look at the lines and objects in your frame and see if moving a step to the right or left would balance out your scene, allowing lines to be straight. We're not suggesting that all your shots should be straight or balanced, but a lot of times you're going to shoot something and you'll be a couple of degrees off from a perfect symmetry, which looks sloppy and a little off-kilter. We suggest making the extra effort to move a little bit to one side or another and balance that frame out to make your lines straight and improve the composition. But what are some of the tricks that you use to check your frame for composition? Give us some of your thoughts in the comments below.